Today I'm starting to work on the prep for a couple more batches. We got a good price on some boxes of Harry and David pears, and we're going to freeze dry some. So let's go get them prepped and get them ready. Okay, so here's one of the boxes of Harry and David pears. This is one of the #1 gifts. So each one of these boxes is about 5 pounds net weight of pears, and I think we have 6 boxes of them. So we have close to 30 pounds before we start slicing them. So I was thinking of using the apple slicer and just put them on and slice them, but not core them. But it puts a pretty good sized core through that, and pears really don't need that much. So I'm not really sure. It probably depends on how firm they are. If they're firm enough like an apple, then I'll probably do that. But pears are generally kind of soft, and the core is really small. It's what we usually use the little scoop for. We'll check this out and get them started. Oh, and then the core on the pear is relatively small. See, it'll fit in that. So I can just scoop this out and pull it out. And then you can take, probably should use the littler knife for this, but just cut a small V where the stem is, and just a little bit. Okay, so that's all it needs for that. And that's why I wasn't sure about using the apple corer, because it doesn't have a big core like the apple has. That's all I need to take out. The downside is then I have to slice them by hand, and I could take off just the little peel end so I don't have to have that, and then just start cutting them into thin slices. Okay, and then we've got that in the bowl of water with the citric acid and ascorbic acid to keep them fresh. I could put these directly onto the freeze dryer trays if I have it available, if it's not already in the freeze dryer, or I can just lay them out on the cookie sheet and then I'll transfer them to the freeze dryer trays later. Probably drain those first, because I'm not going to do any more for a few days because I want to wait till they get a little riper. Those are good though. All right, into the freezer for pre-freezing these. So that slices real nice, just like with the apples. And I could link to the apple video if you want to see the slicer. My freeze dryer's been pre-cooling for a while now. Now it's time to get the pears in there. So today we're doing the pears, the Harry and David pears that I started a while ago. We finished slicing them yesterday and got them in the freezer. We'd started them a week or so ago, but decided they weren't quite ripe enough. So we let them sit out for a couple of days and then put them back in the refrigerator. Now they're much riper, they're much tastier, and they were ready to freeze dry. At batch 600, I'd mentioned about the ice and how far back mine is. And a couple of people have mentioned the short ice, that maybe my refrigerant wasn't working properly or was low, and I was missing coils, that there should be perhaps 13 of them. And since I was opening this one up to clean it, I decided to start it with the rack out so that I could try to count the coils. But then I got sidetracked with starting a 3D print and I missed a couple minutes of it. And so I tried to count them, and I know that I had at least 11 coils and there could have been as many as 13. So I'll watch that to find out if there is a problem with mine and it is becoming an issue. I don't know yet. It seems to function perfectly, so I'm not sure. But I'll keep an eye on it and find out if there is a problem. But for now, let's go get the pears and get them in here. And this time, since there wasn't anything on my trays, I did fill the trays directly for one batch worth. The rest of the pears I put into the little 7x7 pans, and some of them onto the cookie sheet that you would have seen earlier now. So let's go get them. Because the trays were empty and not in use at the time that I filled these up, which is such a rarity, I was able to put the pears directly onto the freeze dryer trays. But I also didn't do anything about a thermometer, 1858. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to put a thermometer just in here, or if I'm going to have to drill a hole, or if I'll just ignore it for the first part and then tuck it in later. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. So we'll get these weighed first, and I filled them pretty full. 1957. Well, I'm going to go ahead and drill some holes. So I wish I'd have thought about the stainless steel rods in there. Well, I thought about them, but I thought I was going to be able to slide the thermometers in between spaces. There's not enough spaces, so it didn't work. Using the little stainless steel rods, I think works very nice, but if I forget or don't do it for whatever reason, I can still use the drill. Okay, now let's get them in. It says it's down to negative 48 right now, so it's chilling very nicely. We'll get these in there. All the trays of pears are still below zero. They're about -5 right now. And because I had them pre-frozen on the trays, I didn't have to load the trays, and usually they warm up to about 10 degrees when I do that, by the time I finish and get them in here. But because I had them on the trays already in the freezer, they're still -5. Nice and cold. Won't take long before I can have it jump to the next cycle. So the drain valve is closed. I've got a seal ring all the way around there. I think that's about it until 2 days from now. And these pears, I have more than 10 pounds in there. I'll have to add it up, but I was loading them pretty full, so I've got more than 10 pounds, and they are pretty thick and they're piled in layers, so it's going to take extra time, and I don't mind it taking extra time. It doesn't take twice as much as doing it in 2 half batches, so it still works out better for me to load them a little fuller and just take the extra time. And then as they're further along in the drying process, I can stir them up a little bit around on the trays, and that should help also. So until a couple of days, don't go away, we'll be right back. I'm a little bit late because it stopped a little while ago, but because I have thermometers inside there, I can tell that it hasn't cooled down enough to be a problem. And since this is the weight check and not the bagging, I don't mind if it's a little bit cool, as long as it doesn't cause any condensation. So we'll get them out, weigh them, and put them back in there for another 2 hours and do the weight check. If they feel wet, damp, or anything anywhere, then we'll give it more extra time and we won't do the weight check yet. So first, we'll open the drain valve. So tray 1, and of course we will be rotating the tray positions, and the tray is starting to get cool. So as I mentioned, if I were bagging them, I would rewarm the tray before I took that out. Okay, so it's 9:30, and I want to kind of check these a little bit because I have them stacked so many layers thick. I want to kind of check in between a couple of them. And I wouldn't take this as any way to check to make sure that they're 100% dry, but you can make sure that they're not finished. I used the weight check to make sure that they are finished, but I can look for wet spots or ice spots to tell me that they can't be done yet, if that makes sense. Okay, I'm not feeling anything, so that's got a good possibility then. So tray 2, 939. I'm going to put tray 2 up on the top spot, and tray 1 come down a spot. And tray 1 was not loaded as much as the other ones were. The tray 3 and 943, and these are definitely stacked pretty high. But with the little pieces, it seems like it's okay anyway. And tray 4, 953. And I'll put tray 4 up a spot, and tray 3 will come down a spot. So if I didn't have the thermometers in there and the machine was already stopped when I came down to check it, I would have restarted it to make sure that the food itself was warm enough that it wouldn't have condensation. But because I have those thermometers in there, I was able to tell that it wasn't going to be a problem yet, and I could do the weight check. Now we'll get the drain valve closed and get it restarted. I'm going to just add more dry time, and when I do this, it'll tell me how long my vacuum pump's been off. And I have an older version, so the firmware is considerably different than the newest ones, and so is the pump. Okay, I did. Continue. Okay, so it had been off for about 40 minutes before I came down. So with that restarted, we'll come back in a couple hours and check it to make sure that it stopped losing weight. If it doesn't lose any weight during these 2 hours, then we know it's already dry right now. And that's possible because I'd already given it extra hours because I was busy earlier and I knew I couldn't check on it. And even with that, I still missed it by 40 minutes. Sometimes it's better to give it an extra hour or two. If you think you're going to be an hour late, maybe give it 2 or 3 hours so it's still going when you come back to it. I only gave it a couple hours when I thought it would only be a couple hours, and then it wasn't quite enough. So we'll see you in just a minute. Well, I'm back. And what was supposed to be 2 hours and then check it turned into over 4 hours now, because I got busy doing other things and finally got back to it. Now let's take them out, check them, and see if they lost weight during that time. Unfortunately, if they did, then we have to put them back in for some more. So we'll get it bypassed by doing a little down arrow past the rest of the time and get the drain valve opened. We'll get them out and check them. So, starting with tray 1, which is now at the second position, and it's very toasty right now, so it didn't have time to cool down at all. 929, and that's one of the ones that would be most likely to have had anything because it was on the top position, which is one of the coolest. Tray 2, also toasty, and that's a very full tray, and it has no change. And that should be low enough. Let's check, make sure that that's touching, so I need to move that tray. And 943, so no change. And tray 4. 953, so no change. Turn the machine off with no defrost. Turn this other fan off. Get this rolled over and I'll be back for the time. Get the defrost fan in the door and my little defrost baffle into place. I'll wait to start this until after we're done bagging, or at least over at the bagging, so we're not listening to this. The time on the machine says 53 hours for this batch. I know that it had about 5 hours of time that it was not freeze drying, it was just sitting waiting for me. So if we take that off, it's 48 hours. And then also these last 3 hours really didn't have any weight loss. So we could back it up to 45 hours as to how long that particular batch of pears took. So I'm going to use the 48 on this one though, just in case, for future reference of filling the tray that full. This is showing that it used 35.38 kilowatt hours during that batch, and it would have been less if I had taken them out on time. It would have been 5 hours worth less, which would equate to, I don't know, 3 or 4 kilowatt hours. And now, bagging. Yeah, we'll get the thermometers removed and find out what they weigh now. And that's the results of the drilling into it when it was already frozen. Not too bad. The gross weight of this now is 921. And then we'll subtract out the paper and the tray, and that'll give us the net weight. Well, we'll get the weights added up and then figure out how we're going to bag them, as in what quantity will fit in a bag. So I've got the data for batch 618, and as you can tell from the numbers and the dates, been going pretty slow lately. These were pears that we got from Harry and David, and they're sliced. They went into the freeze dryer on March 5th, and the total time was about 48 hours for the drying, and then the power usage was just over 35 kilowatt hours. So this gives us the gross weight of each tray, and then subtract out the tray and paper, and that gives us our net weights. Before we started freeze drying them, they weighed about 10.55 pounds. And then did the same thing afterwards, and afterwards it was a total of 741 grams. And we have a water loss of 4,042 grams, but since we won't rehydrate any of these, and especially since we left the skins on, these would be terrible for rehydrating. We'll just eat these as a dry snack, so the water loss isn't really that important. And then if we divide the total weight left at the end, or the net weight, by the 10.55 pounds, we come up with that it's about 70.2 grams per pound. Now we'll see what will fit in a bag. So I have some of the quart bags already labeled, and I put the batch number on it with felt pen, that way it can't come off. And if I lose the label for some reason, I can still refer back to my notebook with all of my information about each batch, and I could match it up with this. But I have the batch number, what it is, Camise Pears slices from Harry and David, and the date that it went into the freeze dryer, and then I'll put the amount before drying. So if the 70.2 grams will fit in this bag, then this bag will have, I'll label it as 1 pound before drying. And if it won't, I'll find out what'll fit, 3/4 of a pound or whatever. Let's get bagging them and find out what'll fit. I'd be kind of surprised if a whole pound can fit in here, but we'll give it a try. So we're after about 70.2 grams. And that's 46. So if I shake them down there a bit, I think I can get it. 70.2, so some of them are going to have to be a little under and some a little over, because it doesn't take much to go sailing on past. There we go. Right, that made it. They're going to be pretty full quart bags, but that's fine. So that is the equivalent of 1 pound of wet pears, and now it's less than a couple of ounces, or it's about a couple of ounces of dry pears. So we'll get them all bagged up in 1 pound increments.
Taxi!
They're like pear flavored cotton candy. They're not anywhere near the same kind of crisp as an apple. They are crunchy. It's really like cotton candy. I'll keep bagging these and we'll be back when they're finished. So got all the pears into bags, 10 1 pound bags, and then the leftover into a little snack bag to take up and eat tomorrow. Oxygen absorber time. So I'm using 300cc oxygen absorbers in these. And we get our bags and our oxygen absorbers from PackFreshUSA, and we have been for a few years. We've gotten good service from them. I mean, they're not sponsors or anything. And you could vacuum pack these, but even if you vacuum pack these, you're going to have a little bit of oxygen in there, and you're still going to have oxygen migrating through there. So I would still recommend an oxygen absorber in there. However, you could use a much smaller oxygen absorber if you vacuum packed. But on these, I'm using the 300s, and let's get them in there. So I'm going to tuck it down the side and then slide it over. So I'm tucking it down the side to make sure that it stays away from the zipper, because these are pretty full, and so it's going to be a little bit of a challenge on closing some of these without ending up in the zipper. So, and then I like to just slide them over a little bit so that I keep track of which one I already put an oxygen absorber in, so I don't miss one and I don't double up on one. Now we'll get them closed, and because they are pretty full, I'm going to kind of pull the ends together or apart from each other, which will help collapse the middle a bit. And I really can't push out any extra air in these because they are pretty bulgy full all the way to the top. All right, and I'll get these all closed first and then we'll seal them. And these zippers are not airtight. You need to heat seal them, but it's better than not having them closed, so I like to close them first and then seal them all. Those are all zippered shut. And now we'll get them heat sealed. I'm going to seal them as high up on the bag as I can to give myself room for messing up. And I'm going to do it twice. Now I'm doing it twice for the first one because mine just has a piece of this same kind of tape under the sealer, under the heat strip, before this giant metal block. So I'm doing it twice to make sure that it gets up to temperature in that amount, because it's like a big heat sink. The newer ones, like my sister got her freeze dryer in October, and it came with a Harvest Right branded sealer, and on that one it has like a silicone strip underneath the heat strip, and so it would kind of insulate it from the bulk of the metal of this sealer. So maybe it doesn't need that going twice the first one. I don't really know. That the subsequent ones I just go once, and then I like to let it cool for a few seconds to make sure that plastic is all solidified inside there again, because you're trying to melt the two layers of plastic together, but you don't want to take it out while it's still melty. So I've got them all sealed high up on the bag with room for a couple more tries if there's something wrong with that seal. If I don't like the look of the seal, if it gets a crinkle in it, or if I just want to cut it off, open it up, take some out, and then reseal it, I've got room to do that at least 2, maybe 3 more times before I get down to the zipper area. Okay. Just like always, I'm going to put a gross weight on each bag. That way, if the bag fails, I'll know. So this bag weighs 97 grams right now. And so if it starts to get heavier, I'll know that water is migrating through that bag. Either I've got a bad seal, I've got a hole in it somewhere, or it's a bad bag and letting moisture in. So I'll do that to each one of them, and then we'll be ready to put them in bins. And if it's jumping between 2 numbers, I'll take the higher number. So as soon as these are all done, we'll move over and put them in a bin. So batch 619 is another batch of pears. This time they're in the little pans. We're not going to follow this batch all the way through because it's pretty much the same as the last batch, so we'll just see it getting started and then let it go. I got some parchment paper now, and we'll get the pears. Once again, the trays are in the freezer, and I have these pre-weighed. I did 500 grams in a tray, or in a pan. And we'll pop those out. And these are going to be pretty big amounts. Get the trays in, starting at the bottom. And this is quite a big batch this time.